Greetings and salutations, DMs, GMs, referees, judges, game operations directors, and all other varieties of storytellers. This is your DM, Scott, and it's time for another DM Quick Tip.
It's some Fey Wild survival tips for you guys this week on DM Quick Tips. This week we're talking about how to survive in the Fey Wild. With The Wild Beyond the Witchlight coming out and many a gaming table preparing to journey into the Feywild, I thought it appropriate to discuss some of the things that I like to add into my Feywild games that I have shamelessly stolen from folklore. Fairies and their like have always been a somewhat sinister presence in folklore. Perhaps this is what the draw is to these fantastic creatures. The fairies of folklore, well, they weren't the fairies of Disney movies. They were quite different. Almost terrifying at times. Here are some quick tips on adding that layer of folklore to your Feywild campaign. When you get into the Feylands, one thing you always want to keep in mind is never accept a gift from Feyfolk, no matter how magnificent this gift is. If you do, that means that you owe them. And owing a fairy means you owe them big, not just little, but big. Also, keep in mind that they may not ask for anything in return immediately. They like to play the long game. They're very long-lived creatures, so they may wait. They may wait a very long time until you have something that they really want. When you do, they will ask for it. And if you don't give it to them, then you're going to have problems. On the topic of gifts, never eat fairy food or drink fairy wine. If you do so, you run the risk that the food that you're used to eating from the prime material plane may no longer satisfy you. Your hunger may never be satiated, and you may find yourself constantly eating. This is perhaps the mildest of circumstances you could encounter from dining with the fairies. Now, fairy wine, while tasty, could drive you mad. Or even worse, it could kill you. There is also the ever-present possibility that you may be trapped within the fairy realm. That's the Feywild to us gamers. If you consume any of these fairy delicacies, you always run the risk of not being able to get back home. In the Fey realms, music is never a good thing. It always sounds good. The rhythm is perfect, makes you want to dance, right? But following music and stepping into a fairy ring can often spell disaster to us mortals. If you're off in the Feywild or some other Fey realm and encounter some music, some beautiful music, and you follow it, you may find yourself standing before what is called a fairy ring. Now, a fairy ring is a ring of toadstools, and it has magical properties that could be quite dangerous if you're not careful. Let's say this music is emanating from the fairy ring, and you step inside it. You may find yourself dancing. What's wrong with that, you may ask? Well, you may find that you cannot stop. In the Fey world, time moves at a different pace. You may find yourself dancing for what you think are moments, but in reality, you have danced your entire life away. Some fairy tales speak of dancers trying to keep up with their fairy counterparts. Maybe you're at a fairy shindig and the music is playing and the rhythm's pretty good, and you get up there and you do the fairy version of the Macarena with a bunch of all the fairy folk, and you can't keep up. But you're trying. Well, these unfortunate folks in these fairy tales have danced their feet and legs away until they're nothing but bloody stumps. It's pretty gruesome. You never want to give the Fey folk your full name. Names are powerful, particularly in the fairy realm. If you're traveling into the Feywild, never give the Fey folk your full name. The entire reason we have middle names is so the fairies can't have power over us. In the old days, it was believed that if a fairy knew a child's full name, they could steal them, and the same goes for us adults. You could be trapped in the Feywild for all eternity. So the moral to the story is always give your characters a middle name. And if you must give a name to the Fey folk, just say your name is Lou. Mind your manners, right? You should always be proper, no matter where you go. But in the Fey realm, it's a little more difficult. We've talked a little bit about what you're going to be refusing in the Feywild, right? No gifts, no food, no wine. Those all spell trouble. The key to all these refusals is to make sure that you are very, very polite, but never say thank you. You don't want to say thank you to the fairy folk because a thank you translates to them as you owe them something. And you do not want to owe a fairy anything. In addition, something as simple as a thank you may not go far with a fairy. They may want something a little more substantial than just a thanks. If you're going to give them a gift, like an article of clothing, a bit of shiny jewelry, make sure it's only of the highest quality because you may inadvertently offend a fairy by giving them a poor quality gift. So if you're traveling into the Fey realm and you're going to be spreading gifts around, don't bring Hershey chocolate. Bring something from Godiva. Don't bring a pair of pants from Walmart. You want to go to Macy's. With the thanks they get in return to them, thanks seems like such a little reward for all the trouble they went to. Now, there are many ways you can survive in the Feywild, and these are just some. We'll see you next time in the dojo.